December 1939. British headlines are filled with a mystery. Where is the Altmark? After the Royal Navy defeat the German warship Graf Spee at the River Plate, the British are now after her supply ship, the Altmark. They want to rescue the 299 British prisoners aboard, but she escapes to Europe and enters Norwegian waters on her way to Germany. Norwegian authorities inspect the ship 3 times and allow her to pass, but the British intervene. They intercept the Altmark against Norwegian wishes, storm it, and liberate the prisoners. The Altmark incident plunges Norway into the very crisis it hoped to avoid. Britain and Germany accuse the neutral nation of favoring their enemy, and now fear the other side will occupy the country. Norway's neutrality will soon go up in smoke. In September 1939, neither Britain and France nor Germany have given much thought to Norway, although both sides expect it to align with the Allies. Norway, however, declares its neutrality, and Foreign Minister Halvdan Koht hopes non-provocative politics will keep the country out of the war. But Norway does play a role. In 1939, Germany imports 22 million tons of iron ore, 9 million of which come from Sweden. The only winter import route is via the Norwegian port of Narvik, and Britain identifies this as a German strategic vulnerability. Complete stoppage of Swedish exports of iron ore to Germany would, barring unpredictable developments, end the war in a few months. Britain considers laying sea mines, a naval blockade, or occupying northern Norway and Swedish ore fields. Initially, Britain requests Norwegian permission to land troops, but Oslo refuses. Koht fears British action will provoke German armed reaction and struggles to resist British pressure. Politically, ideologically, nationally, and personally, my affinity, as well as that of the nation, rested with the Allies. Still, the British had a demanding attitude that was difficult to accept and continuously forced their issues onto us instead of negotiating affably. Instead, the ongoing winter war between Finland and the Soviet Union provides a useful pretext. Britain and France develop occupation plans ostensibly based on helping Finland, but scrap them when the Winter War ends in March 1940. Britain is out of options, so some, especially First Lord of the Admiralty Winston Churchill, push for mining Norwegian waters and German rivers. If the Germans retaliate, which London expects, an additional part of the plan, called R4, prepares troops for a rapid occupation of northern Norway. France is initially reluctant, but eventually agrees. After all, a German attack on Norway might weaken German forces on the Western Front. In early April 1940, British troops in Scotland prepare to land at 3 locations on the Norwegian coast, following the expected German reaction to mine-lay. But before they make their move, Germany strikes first. Germany also worries about the Narvik route and fears Norway might give in to British diplomatic pressure. A fear heightened by Vidkun Quisling, the leader of the fascist National Samling Party. In meetings with Hitler, he exaggerates the possibility of an Anglo-Norwegian alliance and asks for help for a National Socialist coup. Hitler refuses because the German Foreign Ministry and many generals distrust Quisling and his claims of influence in Norway. There are other German motivations for occupying Norway as well. Although countering British occupation is the main goal, controlling Norwegian coastal naval bases would improve German naval flexibility. In January 1940, Hitler orders preparations for Operation Weserübung. Under General Nikolaus von Falkenhorst, German planners work in secret and emphasize bold action. Hitler considered Operation Weserübung to be particularly daring, in fact, one of the rashest undertakings in the history of modern warfare. Precisely that would ensure its success. He described the state of anxiety he would feel until the success of the operation as one of the strongest nervous tensions of his life. The plan, accelerated by the Altmark affair, calls for 8,850 troops aboard ships and 3,500 paratroopers to occupy key ports, cities and airfields in a surprise landing. German troops will present their arrival as preempting a British invasion, but have orders to use all available force to overcome any Norwegian resistance. After securing Oslo, the Germans assume Norwegian King Haakon VII will surrender and legitimize the German occupation. To secure logistical routes, German forces will simultaneously invade Denmark. Not all in the German military are enthusiastic, though. The plan is the brainchild of a small group directly responsible to the Wehrmacht High Command, not the individual Army, Air Force, or naval commands. Luftwaffe officers resent being kept out of planning, while some Army commanders oppose the use of troops meant for the invasion of France. Although the Navy is more supportive, they worry about strong British opposition at sea, with German intelligence suggesting the British will soon move into Norway. Hitler sets Weserübung for April 9, just as British troops are starting to embark for the R4 operation. German warships enter the North Sea. Both Britain and Norway have some advance warning of the German move. On April 8, a Polish submarine sinks a German merchant ship carrying troops and invasion supplies to Norway. The Norwegian Navy informs Oslo of a likely invasion force. But the Norwegian government is focused on reports of British mine-laying. British naval intelligence also detects large-scale German naval movements, but misjudges them as a breakout attempt into the North Sea. This is reinforced when British destroyer HMS Glowworm engages a German force, led by the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper. In an uneven battle, Hipper sinks Glowworm, but not before Glowworm rams and severely damages the Hipper. The British cancel the R4 operation and only now realize the German capital ships are screening an invasion force. So when the 6 German Navy groups head for their targets, their biggest concerns are mines and Norwegian coastal forts. On paper, these are strong defenses, but in practice, they barely exist. The mines haven't been laid, and gun crews lack experience and ammunition. Furthermore, when the first German troops land early on April 9th, confusion reigns. Although some Norwegian patrol craft engage the invasion force, there's little coordinated resistance. In many cases, German ships pass coastal forts before the alarm is even raised. Things are different, though. In Oslo, the Norwegians detect German ships headed by the heavy cruiser Blücher, although their identity is still unknown. Oslo's defenses are focused around the Osgerborg fortress, equipped with heavy 28-centimeter Krupp guns and underwater torpedo tubes. Although most secondary forts are unmanned, Osgerborg commander Oberstberger Eriksson decides to fire on the intruding ships, whatever their nationality might be. Meanwhile, Blücher Captain Heinrich Woldig doesn't think the Norwegians will fire. At 4:02 a.m., Blücher leads the fleet into the Oslo fjord, while smaller vessels land troops at coastal forts. The Osgerborg's guns fire on the Blücher, immediately knocking out its flak fire control and killing many troops preparing to disembark. Smaller guns from the Kopass and Husvik forts also open fire. The Blücher is unprepared for combat and crammed with troops, so the ship reacts slowly. Sonderführer Behrens aboard the Blücher recalls. It was not possible from below to distinguish between hits and our own artillery. Speed was increased. Suddenly, the cruiser was violently shaken and shifted sideways. The engine shut down and the lights went out, emergency lighting turning on shortly after. Nobody could tell us what had happened. Two of the Osgerborg's torpedoes hit Blucher, igniting stored ammunition. With fire spreading, Woldig orders to abandon ship. Inexperienced troops quickly flee, leaving bulkhead doors open and helping the spread of fire and seawater. As the Blucher rapidly sinks, the Norwegian guns turn on the heavy cruiser Lutzow, forcing it to retreat. Oslo's defense, though, is short-lived. After an air battle between German MiL-110s and Norwegian Gloucester Gladiators, German troops land at Oslo's Fornebu airport and advance from the landward side. Capturing the city by 2 p.m., 21-year-old gunner Sundsteby is surprised to see German troops in the streets on his way to work. Everyone I met was as stupefied as me. But the brief resistance provides just enough time for King Haakon, the government, and much of Norway's gold reserves to evacuate. By midday on April 9th, Weserübung seems a success. Germany captures Narvik, Trondheim, Bergen, Stavanger, Kristiansand, and Oslo against light resistance. Simultaneously, German forces also invade Denmark. When the Germans overcome a few pockets of isolated resistance, the Danish government surrenders by 6 a.m. Germany now demands Norway surrender just as Denmark has. It justifies its actions as preempting a British invasion and claims Haakon can remain king in exchange for cooperation. Before King Haakon responds, there's more political drama in Oslo. Quisling, equally surprised by the German invasion, quickly claims to represent a new Norwegian government. Norwegian men and women, England has violated the neutrality of Norway. The German government has offered the Norwegian government its help. The government itself has fled. Under these circumstances, it is the duty and right of the national Sandling movement to assume the powers of government. All Norwegians are hereby called upon to keep the peace. Berlin initially ignores him, but Hitler soon realizes Quisling could be useful and supports his statement. For King Haakon, surrender also means tacitly accepting Quisling as prime minister. In Elverum, north of Oslo, he tells his ministers, "My position is clear. I cannot accept the German demands. I have carefully examined my mind and my position, and I find that I cannot appoint Quisling prime minister, a man in whom I know neither our people as a whole nor its representatives have any confidence at all. Although Norwegian resistance remains scattered, it is growing." Before the king's announcement, Norwegian troops under Colonel Otto Ruge repel a German attack on Elverum. Promoted to commander-in-chief of Norwegian forces, Ruge plans to retreat towards Trondheim in anticipation of Allied intervention. German units in the south also plan to strike north and link up their forces. For Britain, Narvik remains a vital strategic target, and once they understand German intentions, British warships sail for the port. German troops capture Narvik quickly, though, on April 8. This was essential, as after refueling, the 10 destroyers in the invasion armada were to return to Germany to avoid being trapped by the Royal Navy. However, only one fuel tanker arrived on time, which delayed refueling. Early on April 10, 5 British destroyers block the fjord exit. Their commander, Captain Bernard Warburton Lee, knows he's outnumbered, but decides to attack with the element of surprise. As the British destroyers advance in poor weather, they evade German U-boats and attack the unprepared German fleet. At 4:30 a.m., British torpedoes hit German flagship Wilhelm Heitkamp, killing the flotilla commander. As the British destroyers make more attack runs, they sink the Anton Schmidt and damage 3 other destroyers in Narvik. But as the British begin to withdraw, 2 German destroyers surprise them from another fjord. Sailing in front of the British line, German destroyers Georg, Thiel, and Bernd von Arnim fire at close range, severely damaging British flagship HMS Hardy and mortally wounding Warburton Lee. HMS Hardy runs aground, although its guns continue to fire. The German destroyers then concentrate on HMS Hunter, which is accidentally rammed by HMS Hotspur and suffers significant damage. Hunter soon sinks with heavy losses. Both sides now withdraw. Losses are fairly even, but the Germans remain trapped in Narvik with only 2 undamaged destroyers and more British ships on the way. On April 13th, 9 fresh destroyers, led by battleship HMS Warspite, enter the field. German ships are low on ammunition and fuel, but have the protection of U-boats in the fjord. These launch 4 attacks on Warspite, but all the German torpedoes malfunction. Warspite and the destroyers now attack the crippled German fleet, which withdraws into a smaller fjord where Warspite cannot go. British destroyers pursue and both sides exchange torpedoes and gunfire. The German gunnery is more accurate, but with nowhere to go, several German destroyers expend their ammunition and run themselves ashore. German destroyer Eric Giese, though, charges at HMS Punjabi and Bedouin, forcing Punjabi to retreat. At point-blank range, Bedouin reduces Giese to a wreck, which later sinks in Narvik harbor. Its captain knows the end has come. The proper duty of an officer and soldier is to inflict as much damage on the enemy as possible. We had about 10 minutes worth of ammunition and all torpedoes, so we could fight. But I had no hope that we would ever reach port again. The remaining German destroyers, Georg Thiel and Hans Ludemann, attempt an ambush with their remaining torpedoes, the last of which hits HMS Eskimo. Having expended most of their ammunition, they run themselves aground as HMS Hero and Icarus move in and shell the wrecks. By the end of April 13, the British have sunk all 10 German destroyers at Narvik. However, the British do not immediately land troops, even though German army units have left Narvik. Instead, the Allies only make their counter-landings around Narvik and Trondheim on April 16. For Otto Rouge, the help can't come soon enough. From April 11th, German forces push back Norwegian troops in all directions. The Norwegians only fight long enough to delay the Germans and not become trapped in combat against armor and motorized troops. When British troops come to Rouge's aid near Lillehammer, he's disappointed. Most are inexperienced and poorly equipped, partly due to the loss of a major supply ship, the Cedar Bank, to a U-boat. Whatever else had been on the Cedar Bank, we now had only our rifles, a few anti-tank rifles and Bren guns to face the enemy with. Also, the clothes we stood up in. British troops do poorly in their first encounter with German land troops of the entire war. On April 23rd, German armor breaks through a British roadblock near Lillehammer as German Stukas bomb freely. German fighters also destroy all of the British biplanes sent to support the expedition within days. By April 24th, Britain decides to evacuate Trondheim. General Edmund Ironside knows this will outrage the French, whose troops have only just arrived from the front with Germany. I have now issued the orders for the eventual evacuation of the central Norway force on a military base. Ministers, including the Prime Minister, began making up stories they could tell the public. I dare say they will make a story that can pass muster. The thing that troubles me is that we have not taken the French into account. But as the Allies withdraw from Trondheim, a separate Allied force moves in around Narvik, where a victory still seems possible. The German commander there, Edward, considers withdrawing. He has a force of around 4,600 troops, but half of them are sailors fighting his infantry. However, he receives mountain artillery via Ju-52 transports and supplies and German radio and engineering specialists via neutral Sweden. Overall, British troops lack aggression, and it takes them 2 weeks to advance 8 kilometers to the north of Narvik, though the weather is bad. By late April and early May, French and Polish troops, including Alpine experts, arrive, and eventually the Allied numerical superiority makes an impact. By late May, German troops near exhaustion against 25,000 Allied troops. The Allies launch their final assault on May 28 and capture Narvik after a short battle. Dietel and his remaining troops escape towards Sweden. The Allies have finally secured a victory on land against Germany, but it is short-lived and mostly to save face. By June 8, the Allies evacuate again, and Dietel is back in Narvik. King Haakon and his government escape with the Allies, although Rouge remains and surrenders with Norwegian forces on June 10, 1940. The Norway campaign cost Germany around 5,300 casualties, including 2,375 at sea. Allied and Norwegian losses are around 6,600, with around 2,500 at sea. Germany celebrates Weserübung as a decisive victory which prevents Allied action against the Swedish ore fields and secures new naval bases in the North Sea. Meanwhile, Allied hesitation potentially missed opportunities for better results, such as faster counterlandings against isolated German troops. Hitler considered retreating from Trondheim or Narvik several times, and later described the Allied inaction. From a military point of view, it can only be described as frivolous dilettantism. But was Weserübung worth it for Germany? Although the campaign suffered light losses on land, it arguably crippled the Kriegsmarine for the remainder of the war. In addition to the Blücher and the 10 Narvik destroyers, Germany lost 2 light cruisers, 6 U-boats, and 10% of their transport capacity, severely reducing the Navy, while the Royal Navy also suffered losses, including HMS Glorious during the final evacuation. It could sustain these losses. Larger German capital ships like Gneisenau and Scharnhorst also require extensive repair after an encounter with HMS Renown on April 9. In the longer term, the German occupation of Norway eventually increases to 300,000 men, a large garrison for a secondary theater. Meanwhile, ore exports from Narvik plummet throughout the war to negligible level. But Hitler's not worried about these problems in summer 1940. Navies are essential for long, drawn-out global wars, and he intends to fight a short, sharp war in continental Europe. Victory in Norway adds to the growing impression of German military invincibility and vindicates the strategy of bold and even reckless action. As Allied troops evacuate Norway in late May, they already know that Hitler has launched his next major gamble, one which will make the Norwegian bases unnecessary and perhaps even win the war, the invasion of France. Not even 5 years after the Battle of France, the tide had turned dramatically for Nazi Germany. American, British, and Free French troops were crossing the German border and approaching the Rhine River, while the Red Army was about to cross the Oder and storm the Reich's capital Berlin, where Hitler is holding out in his bunker. If you're interested in these last weeks of the Second World War, which don't always get the attention in traditional documentaries that they deserve, we've produced 2 series with a total runtime of over 8 hours. Rhineland 45 covers the last set-piece battle in the West, the Allied advance into the lower Rhine region, and the eventual crossing of the Rhine. 16 Days in Berlin is a day-by-day retelling of the Battle of Berlin, the dramatic climax of World War II in Europe. Both series use detailed maps and animations, feature expert interviews, and were filmed on original location. Unfortunately, we can't upload these documentaries to YouTube because of their uncompromising portrayal of the Second World War. So where can you watch 16 Days in Berlin and Rhineland 45? Ad-free and in 4K resolution. On Nebula, a streaming service we're building together with other creators where we don't have to worry about advertising guidelines or the almighty algorithm. Nebula is available in 4K resolution in your browser, on your smartphone, smart TV, or streaming box like Apple TV or Roku. If you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory, you can watch 16 Days in Berlin, our other original documentaries, Rhineland 45 and Red Adams, as well as a host of other smart creators, and all that for just $36 for an entire year. Right now, you can also get the Nebula Lifetime Membership. Pay once and get access to everything Nebula has to offer for as long as you and Nebula exist. The Lifetime Membership allows us to invest in more original content and improve the platform for everyone. 1/3 of your Lifetime Membership will also support us at Real-Time History directly. The events in Norway 1940 overlapped with the fighting in the Atlantic and the Winter War in Finland. If you want to learn more about these events, check out our previous episode. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the video description below. If you're watching this video on Nebula or Patreon, thank you so much for the support. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real-Time History, the only history channel that knows where the alt mark is, 140 kilometers in that direction.